Hello everyone, we're making a handle to operate the quill on my Alexander Master Toolmaker milling machine. Now, in the previous video we formulated a design around some material that I already had available in the workshop. Well, since then I've been thinking about the processes we're going to be doing on that material, and there's a bit of a problem with the piece of steel I want to use for the hub. Now, let's go down onto the bench and then I can show you what our problem is. This lump of steel is long enough to become the hub, but not quite long enough to be held easily in the chuck of the lathe for machining. I need to increase its length, and this I will achieve by making an extension using a piece of aluminium. This is that piece of aluminium that will become the adapter. I face one end, face the other end, centre drill the face, drill through with a 5.4mm drill bit. I want to make sure that the hub and this adapter stay in line with each other while I fit their fixings. To enable this to happen, I'm going to fit both of them onto a single 5.4mm pin. That pin will definitely keep them in line. This is the 5.4mm pin which I'm going to use for aligning our job to this backing piece. It's actually a piece of 3/16 cobalt tool steel, but it's going to work as an alignment pin for us very nicely. This is the piece of stock we're going to use as a hub, and I need to clean up this surface, get it nice and flat. We're now turning the second face. This end is centre drilled and then drilled right through with a 5.4mm drill. And does the pin fit? Oh yes, look at that. Just what we want for an alignment pin. This piece of aluminium is going to become our adapter. We need to mark this surface out, so the first thing we're going to do, if I can get the top of the pen, is use this marker. Just like that. We're going to mark this out by hand. First, use a centre marker and scribe a centre line. Now mark two hole centres, each 15mm from the centre of the hub. Once I'm happy with their position, I centre dot them. Now we need a second centre line 90 degrees to the first. I use a pair of dividers and sweep each side of the first centre line. I can use the two crosses they produced to line up the centre finder. Mark out two more hole centres and centre dot them. The four centre dots which we just put onto the back of the adapter plate, I need all of those drilled 4.2mm. So I want to clamp it down to the drill. The way that I'm going to do that is by using this spring-loaded centre in the drill. I'm going to put that into one of the centre dots, which is just there, and then charge up the spring and lock it in position. Now that is fairly well locked down, so I know that the centre dot on that on the adapter is in the centre of the drill. All I need to do now is bring this other clamp over like this and clamp it in position. So I now know the centre of the drill is bang in line with the centre dot that's on the back of the adapter. Now it's time to drill it. Drilling hole number 1, number 2, 3 and 4. Right, let's assemble the adapter plate to our hub using the alignment pin. So the pin goes into our hub, the adapter goes on top, just like that. Now all four of these holes in the adapter need to be taken through to the rear of the hub, and but I only want to do one at the moment, so I'm going to align that hole up with the 4.2mm drill. Bring it down until this touches the hub, then come back a bit and lock it down. And now we will set up the clamps. Right, we're ready to drill this first hole into the back of the hub. Now I don't want the depth of that hole going any more than 5mm. So all I'm going to do here is take the drill down to the surface of the hub and then drill in about 2mm. That's all, just enough to give a good centre so I can finish off the hole in the next operation. Right, let us take the clamps off. Because I marked out the hole centres on the back of the adapter plate with a scriber and a rule, they're not going to be in an exactly square pattern. So I need to make sure that I get the adapter plate round the right way to the holes that I'm going to be drilling. So I've marked this hole with a cross and I'm just about to drill this hole now to tap it. Now I want to drill this hole down to 5mm, so what I've done is I've put some marking ink on the side here, scribed a line across 5mm down from the top, eyed up along in this direction, and now I've set the stop on the drill so this drill won't drill any deeper than 5mm. So now it's time to drill the hole. Now I don't think I'm going to have to clamp this hub down for this small hole because it's only going to go 5mm and the chances of the drill snagging up in that isn't great, and even if it does snag, there's no sharp edges on this, so it's just going to push my hand out of the way. So it's a calculated risk. Now on with the drill and we'll start drilling the hole. I can see the stop and we've hit the stop just there. Hole drilled. The hole I drilled in the rear of the hub, just here, I've now tapped M5 right down to the bottom. So I actually started the thread with the intermediate tap and then finished it off with a plug tap. So the thread goes right the way down to the bottom. I've also centre dotted the hole just here and just there. So I'm not going to forget which hole goes where for when we assemble it. The bolt that's going to hold the adapter plate onto the hub, or the 4 bolts, are M5 bolts like this, socket headed, so they've got a nice square head on them. Now that head needs to be sunk into this surface here. So what I need to do is put in a counterbore because I want a flat bottom so the bottom of this head can butt against it. And I do have a counterbore, and that is just here. Let me bring this in closer and I can explain how this works. This image shows a section through a hole with a counterbore at the top. There are several types of counterboring cutters, and the one you see here is similar to a 3-flute milling cutter, but it has this boss at the bottom to follow a pilot hole. The cutting edges are at the end of the flutes just here, and they cut the flat bottom hole. This is the counterbore we'll be using. It has a high-speed steel cutter just here, and that's brazed onto the steel shaft. This is a close-up of the business end of the cutter. This forward part isn't a drill, there are no cutting edges. It's there to act as a boss, follow the pilot hole, and prevent the cutter from wandering. This part of the cutter contains its 2 cutting edges. They're just here and here. The width of the boss at the front of the cutter is 3/16 of an inch, that's 4.8mm. This width determines the diameter of the pilot hole required by the boss. I'm going to use a 4.9mm drill here, as this will give a little bit of clearance and should make sure that the boss doesn't bind. The width here is 7/16 of an inch, that's 11.1mm. It's the diameter of the counterbore that this cutter will cut. Right, we want to counterbore this hole, but at the moment it's 4.2mm in diameter and not 4.8, and the 4.8 is what the counterbore requires as a pilot. So I've put the 4.2mm drill back in the chuck, which you see here, and it fits nicely into that hole. I've set it up on that centre, and the clamps are now tied down. Drill 4.9mm. Okay, we're ready to drill this counterbore, and I'll put some oil on the counterbore and the hole, and let's see how we go. I've set the stop up so we're only going to drill down 8mm in depth. There's one last thing we've got to do to this hole, and that's drill it out 5.1 millimeters, which will be the clearance size for the M5 screw that's going to go down there. Now, as it happens, I haven't got a 5.1 drill, so I'm going to drill it 5.2. Right, before we remove the clamps, let's just check that our M5 screw fits in the hole, which it does, so we've got a good clearance there, and also that the head fits into the counterbore, which it does, and it sits sub-flush. So at the moment, all's looking rosy. Right, let's see if our adapter now screws in place on the top of our hub. We put in the alignment pin, that goes in nicely, and through the adapter, there. Now we've got to line up the tapped hole underneath. We put in our M5 screw, and there we go, we're going in. Oops. Now there should be 5 millimeters of screw coming out the bottom of the adapter, screwing into the 5 millimeters of thread in the hub. And, well, we've got no gap there. It's not loose. We have our dots together, so all is well. Well, this is looking good. We've got the alignment pin in and one of the screws. Now, with those in place, the adapter plate can't move with respect to the hub. So what that means is I can now go ahead and do the same operations on these 3 holes as well. So we'll be drilling them out, I'll be tapping the hub, putting the screws in, I'll be putting the counterbores in, and then putting the screws in and assembling it up complete with 4 screws. Now, you've seen all those operations once already, so I'm not going to inflict them on you again 3 times, so I'm going to do these off camera and then we'll be coming back. All 4 of the screws are now in place and correct. The adapter is screwed quite securely now to the hub, so now we go on to the next phase, which I think is back on the lathe again. Here we are back in the lathe. We've got the hub being held by the chuck, and we have our aluminium extension piece on the rear, and we're now going to turn the diameter of this down so it's very similar to the hub. The turning is finished. We can now hold this assembly by the adapter and start to machine the hub. That, however, will have to wait until the next video, as this one is about to end. But there's just time for a little appetizer. I've now brought the hub over to the Alexander milling machine and mounted it in the chuck of this indexing head. What's going on there then? All will be revealed in the next video. If you enjoyed this video, can you please give it a big thumbs up? It only takes you a couple of seconds and it's really good for the channel. Also, if you have the time, please send in a comment. I look at all the comments and I reply to all of them as well. And with that, this video is at an end. Take care everybody, I'll see you next time. Could you do something like this? Of course you can.